All right, well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Ridglea Baptist Youth Wednesday night Awesome Bible Questions. While the greatest students in the universe sit around talking about God stuff talk, around the table this evening, we have Linsey and Luke and Gavin and Joshua and Sam and Brendan and Cynthia and Lucy and Safira. You know the crowd is on it. That's Mandy. Table's in the way. Godfriend and Andrew. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, around the table, we tend to answer two types of questions. Somebody remind me, what are the two types of questions we tend to answer around? Yeah.
I saw this and it was kind of weird, and I want to see if I post it.
Yes, which is what we did for the last couple of weeks, right? We had some stuff from you guys got handed some stuff in a drive-through, and we're like, hey, you know, some weirdo stuff we got handed. So what's this mess about? You know, what's the other version of the question we answer?
Was
it
life stuff happening?
right? Yeah. So we get, you know, something happens out in life, and you're like, hey, what does the Bible have to say about this or that?
Then like, I forgot something about this and I don't know.
Yeah. So yeah, or you know, this stuff was happening in the Bible, and you know, how does this relate to other stuff we talked about? Something like that. All right. So with that in mind, who has the heat for us this evening? Safira seems excited.
Yeah, because I was my business. It's just really minding my business.
Mm-hmm.
When I come across the weirdest, everybody, let's go to Second King.
All right. OT. All right, we're around the page 300s. 300.
320.
That's like in the middle of it.
Chapter 6.
Okay, Second Kings chapter 6. It's gonna be like 312. Second Kings 6. 2 Kings 6.
No, chapter 6, verse 28.
Oh.
And I was just like, I only see this part, and so I'm trying to like figure out like where's the context.
Yeah.
What?
All right, so what do you see there in verse 28?
She said she saw a video, I think.
A video.
Is that what you said?
I was just wondering, like, because I only read verse, like, I only seen 28 and 29. I'm like, what's the context of what's going on here?
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. So what do you see there in verses 28 and 29? Somebody want to read that for us? So let's read verse 28 since it's so crazy.
And the king asked her, "What is your trouble?" She answered, "This woman said to me, 'Give me your son that we may eat him today, and we will eat my son tomorrow.' So we boiled my son and ate him. And on the next day I said to her, 'Give your son that we may eat him.' But she has hidden her son."
Okay. So a couple folks fighting over cannibalism. This is important. And so the lesson we have learned here today is that the Bible says it's okay to eat people, but it is not okay to say you're going to let someone eat your kids and then later be like, nah, just kidding, you can't eat my kids.
And that's the context.
So there you go. So if you promise to let somebody eat your kids, you got to follow through with that and let them eat your kids.
So the main lesson is follow through with what you promised.
That's right. If you're gonna make a promise, you got to follow through. Good lesson. All right, let's pray. All right. So Spirit, first of all, I love your question that it's, okay, this verse seems weird. What's the context? Where's this coming from, right? Okay, so the easiest way, let's just back up. Now there's some biblical backgrounds, things here we can look at, some sort of stuff from history, things we can look at, but let's just back up a few verses and just kind of read this section and see what's been going on. It may help to, well, yeah, I was going to say it's during a time of famine where food is already short. But no, this actually happened. This is not this is not a parable. This actually is how bad it got. So let's back up just to verse 24 and kind of get a running start at verse 28. Who wants to start reading for us around verse 24?
Afterward, Ben-Hadad, king of Syria, mustered his entire army and went up and besieged Samaria.
Okay, so let's talk for a minute about what a siege is. When you lay siege to a city, what do you do?
Surround it and like block all the entrances and exits.
Yeah, so if they've got a big wall protecting them, right? Think about maybe Jericho, right? They got a big wall surrounding the city protecting or some sort of defenses in the city. You just circle up, and if you don't think you can push through their defenses, you just wait them out, right? You've blocked all entrance and exit into the city, and at some point they'll run out of water. At some point they'll run out of food. At some point they'll run out of something, right? So at some point they're going to have to come out, and when they come out, you got them, right? That's the idea of a siege. Okay, so Samaria is under siege by Ben-Hadad. All right, please continue.
And there was a great famine in Samaria as they besieged it, until a donkey's head was sold for 80 shekels of silver, and the fourth part of cab of dove's dung for 5 shekels of silver.
Now wait a minute. Why are you buying bird poop? Either fuel or food, right? Yeah, well, you can burn it, or you can try to consume it.
We also make makeup.
Interesting. I would be surprised if that was their concern at that particular moment, but now I want to see that. So, are you volunteering? Is that what's happening right now? Next youth challenge.
Contains bat poop.
Okay. You know, actually, okay. I think I've heard that. Yeah. Interesting.
Got on my eyes right now.
That's where COVID came from. I'm just kidding. Okay. So
Maybe it's Mabel.
maybe. So how bad would something have to get? How starved would you have to be before you would consider eating donkey head?
For 80 days wages.
I mean, and this is tons of money, right? Because at some point, can you eat money? You cannot. Yeah, try, right? And so a lot of like future disaster kind of movies start with people panicking about food, right? I mean, that's like one of the first things. Y'all think of some like disaster movies, disaster TV shows, that kind of stuff you've seen where people get
Lord of the Flies.
Okay, yeah, Lord of the Flies. There you go. Get some classic book going here, right? We all had to read Lord of the Flies for school. I had to read that one.
Bird box.
Oh my gosh, no, nobody had to read Lord of the Flies yet?
Lord of the Flies was fire.
Okay, so what had happened was, it actually starts off the same way the Chronicles of Narnia start, right? We've got kids from London who during the bombing of London during World War II are being flown out of London to other places, right? So that's how the Pevensey kids end up staying with the professor in Narnia, or in and end up discovering his wardrobe and going to Narnia and all that. So that was a real actual thing that happened. Kids really were moved out of danger zones, which makes sense. And so in the Lord of the Flies, they're like, wow, what if a plane full of kids being moved from point A to point B crashed and all the adults were killed in this crash and most or some of the kids survived? How would they behave if you have a bunch of kids without any kind of supervision and any kind of authority structure?
Rival situation.
Yeah, in a survival type situation. And the answer is? Yeah, it very quickly devolves into them flipping out, forming groups. This is the good group, you're the bad group, and they kill a kid. I mean, it's bad, right? Anyways, so that. Then we had a suggestion of Bird Box. Okay, so how did that work out? People are running out of food and flipping out.
Because you couldn't go outside, because if you made eye contact with the thing, then
Right.
you died. So they were locked inside of whatever building or house they were in.
Hmm.
So once you ate the supplies, then everybody started, like there was a pregnant girl in one of the houses. And so a lot of the people were like, we should give her more of the food. And then one guy was like, no, because if we do that, then we're going to die. And so their solution was to newspaper the windows of the car and use its GPS system to get
Right.
to the store and get more food, but that put them in danger.
Hmm.
And then they started fighting and.
There we go. Yeah, think of another example.
Yeah, we watched about.
Yeah, the remaining, yeah. Mhm. Yeah.
Some people like had stuff and they're like, I'll give you like, I'm gonna save another money, and they're like, I don't want money right now.
Yeah, who wants money? Yeah. One of my favorite examples of that kind of situation, the financial guy, Dave Ramsey, was talking about in a destroyed economy where normal means of buying and selling are gone, people really don't want gold and silver, right? And so his example was, if you were to be in downtown New Orleans after Katrina had passed through, right? And it's just a waste. If you were to offer somebody money for, a couple gallons of clean water, and be like, I don't know, but you got a gallon of gasoline, couple gallons of gasoline. They're like, yo, I trade you my dang house for some gas to put in my car right now, or clean pair of blue jeans. I mean, that'll get you pretty far. So a bartering system pretty quickly develops because the actual money doesn't hold much value, right? So at this point, we should pause and have an economic lesson. Money is what?
Silicon Valley.
Yeah, money is Silicon Valley. Yeah. Yeah. So essentially, here's what money is. Money is an in-between state between what you have and what you want to get, right? So, if we think of it in super basic terms, I've got a load of tomatoes that I just grew and harvested, right? Well, these tomatoes are not going to stay good all year long, right? They're only going to be good for a short time. And not everybody that I'm going to be trading them with wants tomatoes. So I can trade some of the tomatoes to the guy that's got the potatoes and the guy that's got the bread and the guy that's got, the horse or something. I mean, I've got some of these things can be traded, but not everybody's going to want those things. So the idea was, well, what if we make an in-between state, right? So I can get rid of all my tomatoes now while they're fresh and good before they go bad. And I can trade them for, and as long as we all agree that it's worth something, then this little green paper rectangle that we've decided is worth something, I'm going to trade it for that. And then 6 months from now, when I need some bread, those tomatoes I harvested are not going to still be good, but this paper is not going to go bad. So maybe the guy at the bread store will let me have some bread for the green rectangular piece of paper. That's all money is. Money is just a system that we together have agreed upon that says, and why don't we use this as an in-between state between the goods and services that you have and then the goods and services you're going to need at some point? Because when we talk about growing tomatoes, that's an item and an object you can lay hands on, but like, how could I trade teaching Spanish lessons at a middle school, right? I mean, that happens every day, 5 days a week. So like what, in a barter system with no money, then my school district would have to bring me boxes of potatoes and some loaves of bread every day or something for me to take home. Thank you for teaching Spanish today. Or, that'd be weird, right? So they show up in your English classroom and they're like, hey, coach, thanks for teaching English classes today. Yeah, we brought you. Yeah, exactly. Oh, hey, that did happen, right? Yeah. So in a true barter system, it's objects for objects, right? Items for items. And that's a difficult economy to make work. And it really only works on the super small scale. On the medium to larger scale, people invented the idea of money a long time ago. And they're like, well, here, we'll just have an in-between state and we'll call that good. Okay. So when you get to a crisis situation, though, that in-between state drops out and people want to go back to item for item swapping, right? Bartering, we call that. Yeah. So if you've got, some clean pairs of blue jeans and you're willing to trade them, then they'll be like, yeah. And if you want to trade them for money, people are like, sure, you can have all the green paper rectangles you want to. I can't eat those and can't drink those. So yeah, green paper rectangles are no longer a thing. So back to here. Now let's pause for a minute and talk about the place of Samaria. What do you remember from other parts of the Bible about Samaria?
The Jews didn't like them.
Jews didn't like them. They were related to the Jews, right? They're sort of a Jewish light group, right? They were kind of an offshoot of the Jews, but true Jews felt like the Samaritans have got it wrong. They're kind of like us, but not enough. And they're sort of following the rules, but not exactly. And so we don't care for them and the way they do stuff. And then Jesus had an interaction with the Samaritans. So what was his interaction with the Samaritans? Yeah, he purposely said, we're going to go from point A to point B, and we are going to go through Samaria to get there. And normal Jews would have gone around and be like, I ain't going through there. I'm going to go around there. Jesus like, nope, we're going through there. And when he got there, he ended up talking to a lady and kind of changed the whole town, right? So that's the place we're talking about. Now, this is a long, long time before the Jesus event, right? This is much, much, much before that, but that is the part of the world we're talking about. All right, so they laid siege. Even gross stuff is selling at a high cost. People will eat a donkey head. People will eat, what was the second thing, gross thing we decided?
Dove.
Bird dung, right? Dove poop. So are you starting to get in your heart and mind how desperate people are getting? how bad things are. All right. And we sort of teased the idea already. We know it's about to get even worse, right? It's about to turn to cannibalism. All right, well, please continue. Let's read this train wreck.
Now, as the king of Israel was passing by on the wall, a woman cried out to him, saying, "Help, my lord, O king." And he said, "If the Lord will not help you, how shall I help you? From the threshing floor or from the winepress?" And the king asked her, "What is your trouble?"
Okay, so what does he mean when he says, "Will I help you from the threshing floor or from the wine press?" What do we get on the threshing floor?
Wheat.
And do they have any wheat? So all the regular food's gone. Even the king doesn't have any backup stores, right? He's like, "Look, lady, you're out of food. Guess who else is out of food?" Like, I don't have anything either. And it's not some secret royal stash that I've got and other folks don't. And the wine press, you think there's extra, water to be drunk or wine to be drunk? There's no liquids here, right? We are down to nothing. And so he's saying, "Look, I'd love to help you, but there's no help to be found."
And the king asked her, "What is your trouble?" She answered, "This woman said to me, 'Give your son that we may eat him today, and we will eat my son tomorrow.' So we boiled my son and ate him. And on the next day I said to her, 'Give your son that we may eat him.' But she has hidden her son."
That makes sense now.
When the king heard the words of the woman, he tore his clothes.
Now, let's pause there. What does it mean in this day and time for a person to tear their clothing? Yeah, they're so mad. They're so sad. They're so frustrated. That they'll just rip their clothing as a sign of mourning. So if you see somebody walking around with ripped clothes, especially nice clothes that got ripped, you can be like, "Yo, that person is not having a good day." Like they're in crisis right now, which obviously everyone is in crisis in the town if we're to this point. And so the king is finally broken and he's like, my people are eating their kids.
And basically that lady got played. She said, "Hey, why don't you offer up your son? We'll eat him
Mm.
today, and then I'll bring mine tomorrow. We'll eat him." And then the next day rolled around after they'd already ate that lady's son. And then the other lady hid her son.
Parent, I can't, and then. I wouldn't like.
I know, yeah, you're to that point,
For your foot or your like.
right?
So I don't know, like if you're justifying saying I stop taking revenue by way from the, but like what?
Right, yeah.
How can you even begin to? Things like that as a parent, I mean, as a parent, I think how in the world could you?
And it'd be like me saying, "Hey, give me a Sprite and I'll bring you two tomorrow." And then tomorrow I'm like,
Oh,
yeah.
this, when you're saying that, like my kid's gonna starve to death anyways, right? And so, I'm
Everybody.
exactly, I'm going to help him. This reminds me a little bit of the story of Abraham. Abraham had two wives, gentlemen, not recommended, don't do this. Abraham had two wives. Who were the first two wives of Abraham?
It was, what was her name? Yeah, Sarah.
Sarah, there we go.
Yeah.
So Sarah was his wife, and the Lord said, you were going to have so many kids. And he and Sarah tried forever, no kids, right? And so finally Sarah's like, "You know what? Maybe we can do this in a roundabout way. Why don't you just have some kids with my handmaiden, and then we'll count those like they're our kids." And this worked out super well for them.
Yeah.
They remember the name of the handmaiden? Start with an H. That's right, Hagar. All right, so Sarah said, "Here, sleep with Hagar and it'll all be good." And he did, and Hagar got pregnant and had some kids. But the first kid born was a kiddo named
There was,
I'm gonna tell your Sunday school teachers on you. Ishmael, right? And eventually Sarah did get pregnant like the Lord had promised. And then her kid was named. Was it? Isaac. There we go. Okay. So Isaac, the child of promise, and then Ishmael, the other kid, right? And so at some point, Sarah ran Hagar and Ishmael off. I gave him like a skin of water and was like, "Y'all go." And so Hagar ends up in the middle of nowhere And she's like, you know what? I'm gonna leave my kid here and I'm gonna go over here because we're both about to die of exposure and dehydration and I don't want to watch him die. So she didn't actually attempt to murder her own kid or, somehow eat him. She was just, but same kind of desperation. She's like, I can't handle this. I can't watch him die. I'm going to let him die in peace over here. I'm going to go over a little bit away. And let us remind ourselves, how did Hagar and Ishmael, for that matter, how did they both get rescued out of that situation?
Didn't angel come?
Hagar cried out to the king who was walking along the wall. Oh, wait, no. Who did Hagar cry out to? God. She cried to the Lord God. And after that, she called that place God who sees me. She's like, God saw, I cried out to him. He saw me where I was and he stepped in to do something about it. And so the Lord saved him. So she called that place, or called him the God who sees. God sees me. And so here we have this people who are crying out to the Lord for salvation. No?
No, they're crying out to the king.
Yeah. And that was only even after the cannibalism said it, right?
Yeah.
So after the cannibalism and the bait and switch, right? Then she's like, hey, that lady's cheating me out of eating her kid. And the king's like, yo, it's gotten worse than I thought. Please continue.
When the king heard the when the king heard the words of the woman, he tore his clothes. Now he was passing by on the wall, and the people looked, and behold, he had sackcloth beneath on his body. And he said, may God do so to me and more also, if the head of Elisha, the son of Shaphat, remains on his shoulders today.
Now, who is he threatening there?
The prophet.
So he's not just not turning to God. He's swearing an oath to God that bad things should happen to him if he doesn't kill God's prophet, behead him, no less, specifically cut his head off today. All right. So clearly the situation in this town is about to get better.
Yes.
No? But the king's finally decided to do something. He's heard the cry of his people. He's recognized that they're starting to eat their own kids. And so now he's going to go murder the prophet of God. I don't understand why you guys don't think this story's getting better.
Wondering how old the kids are.
Does make you wonder. Yeah, but let's get some details. Are they, I'm sorry, I just thought of something terrible. We're going to move on, but yes, yeah, it does make you wonder the age of these kids. Are they boiling and eating teenagers? Are they boiling and eating preteens, toddlers, babies? I mean, like, it does make you wonder. Yeah. Sorry, that.
Okay, you're next.
Sorry, Mandy, do you know the Houston thing I'm thinking of? Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. So threatens to kill Elisha. So now let's cut over to Elisha, verse 32. What's he doing?
Elisha was sitting in his house, and the elders were sitting with him. Now the king had dispatched a man from his presence, but before the messenger arrived, Elisha said to the elders, do you see how this murderer was sent to take off my head? Look, when the messenger comes, shut the door and hold the door fast against him. Is not the sound of his master's feet behind him? And while he was still speaking with them, the messenger came down to him and said, this trouble is from the Lord. Why should I wait for the Lord any longer?
Okay. All right. So let's talk about some rescue.
But Elisha said, hear the word of the Lord. Thus says the Lord, tomorrow about the time Asiyah was about 7 quarts of water.
There we go.
Tomorrow about this time, a seah of fine flour shall be sold for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel at the gate of Samaria.
Okay. Now, how much were they paying for a gross donkey head just a minute ago? And how much were they paying for pigeon poop to eat? And then swapping kids to eat too. And he's saying, hey, food's going to be at a regular price tomorrow. Or even cheap. I don't know if it's cheap, whatever. But yeah, food's going to, and it will be available. I mean, do you think they were paying all that for a donkey head because there was also wheat to be had? Because there was also flour in existence still? And he was like, hey, you guys are going to have all the usual stuff for regular prices tomorrow. How is this going to happen? Anybody happen to already know how the story finishes? All right, well, let's keep reading. It's a crazy story.
Then the captain on whose hand the king leaned said to the man of God, if the Lord himself should make windows in heaven, could this thing be? But he said, you shall see with your own eyes, but you shall not eat of it.
Ooh, burn. Okay, so when he said, if the Lord rained down food from heaven himself, this couldn't happen. Does this guy know his Bible? Does the Lord literally open heaven and put food on the ground for 40 years while they wandered in the desert? What did he put on the ground? Manna and quail. Yeah, they complained they didn't have meat to eat, and he said, fine, you're gonna have quail coming out your nose. It's kind of a funny little scenario there too, but yeah, so they had bread or something like bread and quail in the desert. And these guys are like, even the Lord couldn't open heaven and feed us. And he's like, dude, he literally did that for decades, but sure. And so Elisha's like, yeah, no, you're gonna see it. Can't have any. All right, well, let's continue. This gets better.
Now there were 4 men who were lepers at the entrance to the gate.
Wait a minute. So these guys were at the town, but not in the town? Why couldn't they come in the town? Yeah, they were considered sick and contagious, right? They're like, no, you got to keep that mess out of here. You're in quarantine, stay away. But if they're outside where the siege is happening, how come the siege people aren't just killing them?
Because they're sick.
Because they're gross and contagious, right? Yeah. So even the people who are there to kill, and rampage are like, yeah, but not those guys. Well, nobody wants that mess. Please continue.
And they said to one another, why are we sitting here until we die? If we say, let us enter the city, the famine is in the city, and we shall die there. If we sit here, we die also. So now come, let us go over to the camp of the Syrians. If they spare our lives, we shall live. And if they kill us, we shall but die.
Okay, so is there some logic here? Now, at any point, are these lepers, again, outcasts and folks who are not part of regular society, are they considering boiling and eating each other? So cannibalism is, these guys are the gross bad ones, and yet they're not considering cannibalism as an option.
Because they're sick.
That's true. They're like, well, we all kind of gross, but you're grosser, right? And so here they are at the gate of the city, and they're like, well, if we go over to the bad guys, maybe they'll take pity on us. They haven't killed us yet. And we're going to stay here and starve. We can go in and starve. We can go over there, and either they're going to put us to the sword, or maybe they'll be, take pity on us and just give us something. And like, well, let's go try that. So how's that work out? It does sound like Odysseus, yeah.
They rose at twilight to go to the camp of the Syrians, but when they came to the edge of the camp of the Syrians, behold, there was no one there. For the Lord had made the army of the Syrians hear the sound of chariots and of horses, the sound of a great army, so that they said to one another, behold, the king of Israel has hired against us the kings of the Hittites and the kings of Egypt to come against us. So they fled away in the twilight and abandoned their tents, their horses, and their donkeys, leaving the camp as it was, and fled for their lives. And when these lepers came to the edge of the camp, they went into a tent and ate and drank. And they carried off silver and gold and clothing and went and hid them. And then they came back and entered another tent and carried off things from it and went and hid them. Then they said to one another, we are not doing right. This is a day of good news. If we are silent and wait until the morning light, punishment will overtake us. Now therefore come. Let us go and tell the king's household. So they came and called the gatekeepers of the city and told them, we came to the camp of the Syrians, and behold, there was no one to be seen or heard there, nothing but the horses tied and the donkeys tied, and the tents as they were. Then the gatekeepers called out, and it was told within the king's household. And the king rose in the night and said to his servants, I will tell you what the Syrians have done to us, that they know that we are hungry. Therefore, they have gone out of the camp to hide themselves in the open country, thinking, when they come out of the city, we shall take them alive and get into the city.
All right, so the king, again, the guy that wanted to kill Elisha, his first thought is, the Lord has saved us. Thank you, Lord.
Thinks it's a trap.
His first thought is, it's a trap.
I will say, for being technically, we're probably now and stuff, I can see why he would probably have.
Mhm.
And we're like, we'll send a couple of people out and make sure they.
He's like, oh, that's a good trap. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
baiting us. Yeah,
Baiting
it's definitely a trap. They're like, hey, plenty of stuff out here. Look, no one's here. Definitely not going to shoot you with arrows when you come out. 13.
And one of his servants said, let some men take 5 of the remaining horses, seeing that that those who are left here will fare like the whole multitude of Israel who have already perished. Let us send and see.
Wait, they had some horses they hadn't eaten?
Mhm.
I'm like,
You think they were gonna eat those horses again at some point? You think they had eaten some of the other horses at that point already? Good chance.
Well, how did the kids before the horses?
what would the king have?
These are probably king's horses, yeah. So the king was claiming that he was out of wheat and stuff, which probably was true, but yeah, apparently had 5 horses left. Now, what's he feeding the horses? I don't know, his horses are probably starving too. They're feeding kids to the horses, yeah. Mm.
So they took 2 horsemen, and the king sent them after the army of the Syrians, saying, go and see. So they went after them as far as the Jordan, and behold, all the way was littered with garments and equipment that the Syrians had thrown away in their haste. And the messengers returned and told the king. Then the people went out and plundered the camp of the Syrians. So a sea of fine flour was sold for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel, according to the word of the Lord. Now the king had appointed the captain on whose hand he leaned to have charge of the gate, and the people trampled him in the gate, so that he died, as the man of God had said when the king came down to him. For when the man of God had said to the king, 2 seahs of barley shall be sold for a shekel, and a seah of fine flour for a shekel. And about this time tomorrow in the gate of Samaria, the captain had answered the man of God, if the Lord himself should make windows in heaven, could such a thing be? And he had said, you shall see it with your own eyes, but you shall not eat of it. And so it happened to him. The people trampled him in the gate, and he died.
There we go. All right, so Safira, you found a weird verse and you're like, hey, what's up with this? Then we read a whole bunch more and it got weirder, and then it got weirder. I mean, you can't make this stuff up, right? I mean, this is pretty bad. So does it make sense though that in a town where people are so starving, they're eating gross stuff and even considering cannibalism or practicing cannibalism, that as soon as someone says there is ample food right over there, that somebody gets trampled? I mean, people get trampled at like soccer games, right? I mean, people
To get to the Avatar room.
yeah, people get trampled at the Avatar, right? People get crushed to death at a Travis Scott concert just because someone opened a gate somewhere and a bunch of people go, right?
Mhm.
I mean, so is it crazy to think that the captain of the guard, you know, you're opening the gate, a lot of people, and that dude gets trampled in the process? Yeah, that's exactly what happened. So there you go. Good question. Folks, this is full of a lot of really weird stories and some crazy stuff that's happened.
Well, and that's why.
Well,
Context is important.
Yeah.
For someone just to see that, if you just had those 2 verses. Like, yeah, that's why.
I want to call you a little bit on the stuff y'all don't teach us, because we've had a lesson recently on the lepers, right? Now we didn't spend a lot of time ahead of, not here on Wednesday, but we, you know, we were talking about the lepers and coming out, and you know, it's wrong for us to keep this good news to ourselves, right? That was part of a thing that we had done not too long ago. And then for the backstory, we talked a little bit about the famine and how bad things had gotten. So let me then challenge you with a question. If you know for certain that you have been taught things in this Bible, things like who is Abraham's first 2 kids, and it takes us a really long time for us to discover it was Ishmael and Isaac, or who was Abraham's wife. You know, these are not random side characters, right? These are the major players in the course of the Old Testament. What does it take then for you to feel like you really do know this book? That there's not weird hidden little corners that somebody can print on a handout and hand you in a drive-through, and you can be like, what, really? Is that in there somewhere? Or you can just stumble across it and be like, hey, you know, here's rando stuff the Bible talks about. You're like, whoa, what, cannibalism? What? People boiling and eating their kids? So what would it take for you to be comfortable enough with this total non-mystery book for you to feel like, oh, yeah, I do know that story. Yeah, that's familiar. I remember having read that, right? Well, I'm glad you asked, or I'm glad I asked for you. You know that we have some of these action Bibles sitting in a box right over there, right? It is the comic bookized version of the Bible, and it's good. And it's got a lot of some of the more unusual, unfortunate kind of stories, like maybe some of the stuff we just read this evening. But if you haven't had a chance to read through one of those, I've got plenty and you're welcome to have one, right? Or how about even just the regular Bible? I mean, it's here to be read, right? It's not intended to be a mystery. It's not intended to be something bizarre or strange, but rather something comfortable, something that you've covered, right? We're not supposed to be like the captain who says, well, gosh, if the Lord would just open the windows of heaven and rain food on us, but that's not going to happen. We're supposed to be people that know scripture and be like, dude, that totally happened. Like the Lord did that. He saved people that way. So anyways, just a thought. All right. Well, excellent question. Thank you for bringing that challenge to us this evening. So I challenge you then, find more weirdo stuff that you'd like some background on. Find some of the crazy stuff that goes on in some of these stories and be like, okay, so I was reading this thing in the Bible and I was like, wait, what? And then let's have a look at it. Okay. There you go. There you go.
Don't forget, you have to bring your first deposit for camp by the end of this month.